Hey, I'm Carson James, and we're going to talk about kind of the three different main pieces of headgear for traditional Buckaroo or Vaquero type horsemanship. Now, the one that everybody's pretty familiar with is your hackamore. Notice it's a rawhide hackamore, what I call like a real hackamore. Has no mechanical aspects to it. You notice that the fit of this thing, and it might be kind of hard to see from the camera, but this is a really good one in the sense that you can tell it kind of has even contact pretty much all the way around his muzzle. So think of like the way a ball cap fits on your head. There's no one point to where there's more contact than the other. So this is a pretty well built one, and it looks like I've got about the right amount of wraps. I could take one more wrap before pulling my Makati through, and I could suck it down a little more. Or we could even assume that this could go up a little bit higher on his nose. Their bony structure in here, it comes to a real fine point right in here somewhere, and you don't ever want any kind of nose band of any type way down here on the nose. So if we were to just kind of take a rough measurement, I'm going to place the width of my hand at the top of his nostril, and then we're going to go like 3 more fingers up. So if we go here and then we go about 3 more fingers, I'm going to go ahead and instead of taking another wrap, I'm going to leave it kind of loose, and I'm going to just tighten up the hanger a little bit. You notice where now we've kind of brought it from here to up there. So this right here is a better position than that there. So you know, right in there somewhere. Figure your hand plus 2 or 3 fingers. Don't have it down here. It's kind of a bad deal. Traditionally, the reasoning behind the system that we're talking about right now was to preserve the lightness of the mouth. So obviously, as a colt, and until he's, you know, kind of pretty much got a pretty good idea of everything you would ever want him to do, you would teach all of it in this. So all of the pulling and the being heavy-handed, if you ever had or needed to do that, it would all be done on the nose, so you're preserving the sensitivity of the mouth. Oh, thanks. And then the next thing that would come along, depending on how you wanted to do it, this is more of a not as traditional deal, but you might go from a hackamore, and then you might move into like a O-ring or a D-ring snaffle bit. Some of them have rollers right here, some of them don't, but you notice there's no shank. This is still same as this. It's not meant to be a leverage type of headgear. Both of these have a 1-to-1 ratio. What that means is if you feel 1 pound on your hand, the horse is feeling the same amount of pressure on his nose, mouth, etc. Now, when we go to add shanks, it can be a 1-to-2, 1-to-3, even like as high as a 1-to-5 leverage ratio. Meaning if I think I've got 1 pound from what I'm feeling on my hand, that bit is amplifying that pressure and making it more like the horse is feeling 6 pounds. So that's kind of where the terminology, the more experience, you know, to use a bigger bit, you should be more experienced because you kind of want to know what's going on there. Now, a really handy thing for when, you know, moving to a bigger or, you know, for lack of a better word, more severe type of headgear, you have to remember it's kind of like putting on spurs. If you go bigger, it's going to amplify what is already there. Not only will it amplify the good, but it will also amplify the bad. So if you have a horse that rears up instead of backs up, putting a bigger bit will probably just make him rear up even more. If you have a horse that softens his nose, picks up his back, picks up his feet, and backs up beautifully, if you put a bigger bit on it, it's just going to make that, all of that, even better, and it's going to feel like it makes it weigh a little less in your hand. A lot of times people say, well, if my horse is riding that good in something like this, why would I move to something with more signal or something more further up the line of education for the horse as far as headgear goes? The answer is you might have a perfectly good running vehicle that gets you from A to B, but some people like the refined feel and experience and the feedback of when they buy the Porsche, right? Both of them work just fine. That's kind of a good way to look at why you might do that. And now going back to what we just talked about how we try to refine these things. Okay, well now we're getting into a horse that's, you can pretty much do anything you want, bridleless, more or less, let's call it that. So now we may move into an actual bridle bit. So this is what they refer to as a half-breed bit, And when we move into something like this, we are talking purely off of signal. So all of the pulling, or even using a little bit of pressure, ideally all of that's kind of pretty much done by the time you move into the actual bridle. And if you start to look closely at this bridle here, everything about this is made for signal. You see how these are metal hangers instead of the typical leather? The reason that's like that is so this thing can more freely have that swing, because that's a pre-signal. I don't know why there's not a curb strap on this, but it would be a strap and not a chain. You don't want these leverage devices to feel like they're biting the horse's muzzle or bottom jaw. Usually a biting type sensation yields pretty bad results. And then we move down here to our chains. These are weighted chains, and they are a specific weight, and so are the braided knots on these reins. All of these combine together to allow this bit to hang at a certain angle and balance in the horse's mouth. So if he starts to get above the bit, that weight kicks in and it makes the port just rest a little more firmly on the roof of his mouth. See how that works? And then as I bring my nose down onto the vertical to a more balanced carriage, you notice now the bit is sitting in a neutral position. If I start to get behind the bridle, underneath the bit, well, now it's going to be pushing on my tongue. So the idea with these types of setups is that through time, your horse learns to find the balance of these bits and get it to where it's neither pushing on his the roof of his mouth or his tongue. And the idea with that is it helps him learn to establish his own head carriage, which is a further aid in developing collection and balance and strength in the right areas. Now, once again, yes, all of this is set up to help a bit balance and the horse find a good head carriage, but it's also meant to have a really refined signal. So like, notice how without even pulling, see how I can move that bit? See, that would be a signal. So like, if I want to stop my horse, I don't even actually pull on the rein, I just signal it, and that's the stop. If I want to turn to the right, that's my right turn, that's my left. See how we're moving into signal now. So you get them really, really broke, and then about the time you feel like you could do everything without reins, you put something like this on him, and then you actually kind of do start riding him without reins per se. At some point, your reins become a signaling device, not a pressure release kind of device. So that would be the upper levels, and that would be kind of the system or the process of the different types of more or less traditional headgear and what you would start with, and then why and when you would move into something more refined. Hey, if you'd like to get a more in-depth video of what you just saw, we have it's probably about an hour long. We go into pretty deep detail about the stuff you just saw, traditional aspects, different types of headgear, why, when, and how, things like that. So to get to that video, you can just go right here. He's a really good bridle holder.